Morning. I'm so glad you've taken the time to join us for this morning's webinar. Welcome to our University of Louisiana System Bridging the Divide Summer Series. Today's webinar is an abbreviated subaward primer for grants and research personnel. I am Cheryl Hall, Director of Sponsored Research and Programs at Southeastern Louisiana University. I also serve as the University of Louisiana Systems 2023 content expert in the area of grants and research. I am a former Department of Defense civilian employee in the area of contracts and acquisitions, a licensed attorney, and a certified federal contracts manager. Today, I will share information relative to subawards for university and grant personnel to process, monitor, and manage. If you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A. And without further delay, let's begin. Things we will cover this morning. Key terms defined, subaward versus procurement action, subrecipient proposal processing, subaward setup, subaward monitoring, subaward management and closeout, summary and key points, and at the end, we'll do our Q&A. First key term, what is a subaward? A subaward means an award provided by a pass-through entity to a subrecipient for the subrecipient to carry out part of a federal award received by the pass-through entity. Okay, let's break that down to layman's terms. A subaward means an award provided by a pass-through entity. A pass-through entity would be considered Southeastern. To a subrecipient, if Nichols is doing a portion of my work, Nichols would be the subrecipient to carry out a part of the work of the award received from the federal government by Southeastern, which is classified as the pass-through entity. What is a pass-through entity? A non-federal entity, and that is if the funds are coming from the federal government, that provides a subaward, which means an agreement, to a subrecipient, which means an institution or organization, to carry out part of a federal award. Pass-through entity must ensure that all subawards include all required information at the time of award. Most documents must document any changes to the subaward during the period of performance. What is a subrecipient? A subrecipient is a non-federal entity that receives a subaward from a pass-through entity to carry out part of the federal award, but does not include an individual that is a beneficiary of such program. A subrecipient may also be a recipient of other federal awards directly from a federal awarding agency. So if Nichols receives a part of our award, which is deemed a subaward, they are also eligible and can receive awards on their own as a prime awardee, meaning as a pass-through entity. Which instrument is it? So when we get ready to prepare the document or the instrument that we will use, the type of agreement, we have to determine whether it's a subaward or a procurement action. So, meaning first, the ultimate determination is based on the statement of work. In your statement of work, if you have a professor from Northwestern that's going to do some type of research training or work in any capacity on that particular project, then it's a subaward. To help with this decision, ask the principal investigator at your institution, that's the person that's writing the proposal and want to include the other school or organization in the project, ask them one question. And that is, will the person at the other institution be listed on publications that emanate from the project? If that answer is yes, then we're looking at a subaward and not a procurement action. A procurement action could be a professional service contract. And that's mainly what we use here at Southeastern, other than our subawards. A professional service contract may be for someone that's gonna just do an evaluation piece of your award, or it may be just to purchase a piece of equipment or several pieces of equipment from a particular vendor. The difference between a subaward and a procurement action typically comes down also to who is going to own the work. While the work of a consultant may be intellectually beneficial and significant, if the institution, your institution, Southeastern, Nichols, Northwestern, whomever, is going to own what the entity or individual produces, then it's likely a consulting arrangement. Now, please note, subawards typically are not made between an institution and an individual, as opposed to an entity. Any arrangement here at Southeastern with an individual would be considered a consulting arrangement. Now, once we decide that there is going to be some work that needs to be farmed out to another investigator at another school, then we have what we call the subrecipient proposal processing checklist and schematic that we use. And it consists of things that we ask that school or entity to provide us. First of all, it's a statement of work. In that statement of work, they will give us a description of the proposed work, detailing the portion of the work to be conducted by that school, institution, or organization. We ask for a budget. A line item budget of proposed cost is required for each budget period. If it's one budget period, it's one cumulative budget. If it's a multi-year budget, we get a budget for each individual year and then a cumulative budget of all years rolled together. We also request a budget justification, which is a narrative of those line items, justifying the need for those proposed line item costs and how they relate to the purpose of the scope of work. We ask for bio sketches, and that may be a succinct paragraph, or it may be usually a form where they fill out with their education, experience, and any type of publications. We ask that for the PI and other senior personnel that will be working on the particular project. We don't ask for bio sketches for any graduate assistants that you will hire, any students you will hire, any administrative assistants, mainly for those doing the research portions of the work. Other supporting documents may be requested also that we have to submit along with our big proposal package to the sponsor. If you have any institutional research and oversight committee approvals, meaning human subjects, animals, recombinant DNA, things of those nature. We ask for your facilities and administrative rate agreement, your fringe benefit rate agreement, institutional information, your UEI number, your congressional district, and things of that nature. And we also require an institutional endorsement. That's typically a signed letter certifying that the subrecipient has reviewed all aspects of the proposal. Next, when we receive all that information and it's been determined that the particular federal agency, state agency is going to issue an award for that particular project, then we will contact the sponsored programs office at that particular institution to set up an award. First, a subaward will not be issued nor payment to a subrecipient authorized prior to receipt and acceptance of a funding commitment from the prime sponsor. Meaning, if we don't have an award in hand, we cannot issue a subaward for you to you or to your institution to commence work. When an award has been received from the sponsor, If a subaward was budgeted as part of the proposal process, a line item will be created in the fiscal budget setup. So on our side of the house here at Southeastern, if we're gonna issue a subaward to XYZ institution, when we set up our budget in our system, then there will be a line item for that particular institution that we are issuing a subaward to. Once the subaward has been fully executed, we'll get that document together, send it out to the sponsored programs office at XYZ institution, have them review it. They'll send it back. If there's no changes, everybody's happy with it, we'll sign off on it. Then we'll put it in our system to start the management and monitoring of that subrecipient's performance against that prime award. The period of performance of a subaward must be within the period of the performance of the prime award. Meaning, if our award runs from January 1 to December 31st, then the subaward cannot run before that start date or after that end date. It has to run within that time frame. Now, let's discuss the roles of the parties that play a big part in the management and monitoring of a particular subaward. First, we'll talk about the principal investigator's role, and that's the faculty person, staff person at the institution who will be responsible for the overall aspects and oversight of the project and the research of that particular project. First, the principal investigator, he or she monitors all programmatic aspects of the award, ensures subrecipients comply with the provisions of the subaward, obtains any technical reports, any invoices, or other deliverables in a timely manner. Here at Southeastern, the technical reports of a subawardee are submitted to the PI. The invoices are submitted to the PI for review, and if all is in order, then the PI okays them for payment. Monitors all fiscal aspects to ensure that costs are appropriate, approved, and accurately recorded in the accounting system. So when an invoice comes in, or if there's a request by a subawardee to make a charge or something or expend funds outside of what's in their budget, then the PI is responsible for reviewing that and giving a yay or nay along with sponsored programs and our grants accounting office. The sponsored research office's role. First, sponsored research is responsible for the oversight of the subrecipient monitoring throughout the life of the award. So once the subaward is issued, then the sponsored research office sets up a file separate and apart from the main file for that project. And then we're tasked with making sure that all aspects of the project are being followed and followed timely from the time it's awarded till the time the project closes out. These responsibilities include reviewing whether or not a subrecipient or vendor relationship exists, determining whether or not the subrecipient or its PI are debarred or suspended from receiving funds. Now, that particular bullet, we do that early on. That's before the award. We do that during the proposal process to make sure that that particular principal investigator at that subawardee's institution is not debarred or suspended, or the institution itself is not debarred or suspended from receiving federal funds. And we also make sure that it should be a subaward going to that subrecipient and not a vendor relationship where a person is merely serving as a consultant from that particular institution to do an evaluation portion of the project. Sponsored research also monitors activities of the subrecipient as necessary to ensure compliance. It also assesses the potential risk associated with subrecipients and takes the necessary actions if a subrecipient is determined to be a high risk. So in our subrecipient monitoring and review, we look at and to determine whether or not they've had pre-award audits, if they have had any audit findings or several audit findings, to determine the risk associated with doing business with that particular institution or organization. Now, our Grants Accounting Office, they work hand in hand with our Sponsored Programs Office and play a huge role in ensuring that the financial welfare of the project is intact. First and foremost, if an invoice is submitted for payment, the Grants Accounting Office does its due diligence in making sure that invoice is tagged to the proper project. So one of the first things they'll do, they'll check for the PO and the budget unit number. The budget unit number is the number assigned to that primary award in which that subaward is issued under. It also verifies, once they get the invoices, that the expenses are allowable per the subaward's approved budget and the prime awardee. So meaning, if the expenses on that invoice do not mirror what they said they were supposed to purchase in that line item budget that's submitted during the proposal phase, then they will ask the PI, hey, they're trying to purchase something that we don't see approved in the original budget. Do you have any modifications to that budget? Or has there been approval given, prior approval given by the funder or the sponsoring agency? Also, Grants Accounting verifies that the expenses are in agreement with the programmatic plan and work completed to date. Now, the programmatic plan is your statement of work / scope of work, whatever you term it, because they use those terms interchangeably. So you don't want your subawardee invoicing you, say you have $100,000 agreement, and you don't want them invoicing you for $40,000 in the first 3 months of the agreement. Now, that may be okay if a portion or a large portion of it is for them to purchase some type of research equipment to do some research work. But if that's not the case, you need to make sure that your expenditures are in line with that statement of work, because that project also includes a timeline. So look at your timeline within that statement of work to kind of make sure the expenses are on track. Now, I use the example where they're paying too much. They may be invoicing too much. Well, you might have a situation where they're not invoicing enough. So you want to look at where they are in their scope of work. Maybe they're a little behind and you want to contact them and see why they're behind. But things of that nature, that's what the Grants Accounting Office will kind of let sponsored programs know, let the PI know, and we'll kind of get on the same page and see what's going on. Also, the Grants Accounting Office reviews the invoice to determine if the total amount invoiced agrees with the total expenses listed for that particular billing period and by the budget category. And it verifies that the F&A, which is indirect cost, is calculated correctly within the agreed upon rate and the base per the agreement. Grants Accounting also verifies that the invoice contains the required cost sharing information if the terms of that particular subaward includes cost sharing requirements. And lastly, it also verifies that the invoice has the proper institutional signatures to certify that the charges are true, accurate, and correct to the best of the institution's knowledge and are being used for the appropriate purposes. Now, once you have your award and it's going good and you start working and you see some things might need to be changed, we call those modifications to that particular award. Some modifications, organizations, entities are able to do without getting a prior approval, but some may require prior approval. First, extend the period of performance. You realize as the subawardee, something may have happened and you cannot get the job completed within that period of performance. We said January 1 to December 31st. Well, something caused a delay, and now you're a little behind. Well, you will request a modification to your period of performance through your PI. The PI will contact sponsored programs and say, hey, my institution X needs to extend. They're not going to be able to complete within the timeline we set. So sponsored programs will take a look at the regulations, look at the project, and see if it's a one-year project and ours is not extended. Well, we can contact the agency and say, hey, we need to get an extension on the prime, because the sub cannot run longer than what your primary award runs. So to extend their period of performance, if we had them running at the same time. Now, if we gave ourselves a little leeway and was ending theirs a little earlier than ours, we can go on and extend theirs for maybe a little bit of time. But if not, if we gave them the same amount of time that ours is running, we would have to go back and see if we can get an extension on the prime to extend the subawards period of performance. They may want to rebudget some funds. They may have decided that they were going to have, let's say, 3 student workers, and they realized they only needed 2 for this particular project, and they have some funds left in that student category, and they need some more reagents or something, chemicals or other type of supplies to run that particular project. Or it may be some other rebudgeting concerns in the particular project. Some of those rebudgeting concerns we can do. And if it's other rebudgeting of funds, then we may have to contact the agency. Now, we may modify the agreement to obligate incremental funds. If it's a multi-year project, sometimes funds are obligated on a yearly basis. So we'll do a modification to obligate the second and the third year increment if it's a 3-year project. But we'll do a modification to the particular award. If the award was $100,000 for year 1, they get another $100,000 for year 2. We'll do a modification to obligate the year $200,000, which will take the total subcontract amount up to $200,000. Make any administrative changes. Sometimes you'll get from your particular agency what they call an AMOD. That's an administrative mod. It may be simple, something as simple as changing the program manager at that particular funding agency who's going to oversee your particular project. It may be something other than something simple as providing a new clause or a new regulation for your particular project. That's considered an administrative change. Or you may have a change on your institution side of the house that you need to make them aware of. That can be an administrative change. Carryover funds. We'll do a modification if we have approval to carry over funds from one year to the next, if it's a multi-year. If you have a project and you had $100,000 in year 1, you only use $90,000 and you have permission, we have permission to carry over funds, then we'll do a modification that states the purpose of this modification is to carry over year 1 funds into year 2. And then that will be recorded as a matter of record in your award document. Sometimes we reduce funds. Now, I see this a lot now when we close out projects. What we get is called a deobligation modification. And basically what it does is it takes the funds away from a project that has closed. And it's basically, if it was $100,000, you spent 90, you had 10 remaining, then the agency will send a modification saying, I need you to verify that you have $10,000 remaining on this project. You only spent $90,000. Therefore, we're going to reduce this project by $10,000 to the $90,000. And that takes the funds and put it back in the federal government's coffers. And also a modification, if there's a change of principal investigator on a project. You might have a principal investigator that leaves your institution, but the project is going to remain at your institution. So you submit the proper paperwork, such as the bio, the reason for the change to that particular investigator. And that is worked through electronically. I know now they do a lot of these change of principal investigators through an electronic system. Research.gov for NSF is one of the systems that we use when we have a change of principal investigator and the project is going to stay here. So they'll approve that and send us a modification showing that Professor X is no longer associated with the project because of X, and the project is now under the direction of Principal Y, Principal Investigator Y. So we've done all that good work. We've managed the project. We've monitored the project. Now it's time for us to move toward closing out the project. So the project is closed out when the subawards period of performance comes to an end. Now, sometimes projects are closed out prior to the end of period performance because of funding issues. Funds might not be available. The federal government might have thought they had X amount of funds, something happened, but mostly it's when the period of performance comes to an end. The final period of performance may be slightly shorter than the pass-through entities. Remember, I said that, Southeastern, to allow sufficient time to receive and review final reports, verify subrecipient data, and incorporate the subrecipient's research results into the pass-through entities if Southeastern was issuing the award to the subrecipient, School X, final technical report to the sponsor. And this is pretty commonplace because you really want, the PI really wants to give himself some leeway to get all the final reports in. He needs to verify that data and information that the subrecipient has submitted, and he needs to weave that information into the final technical report that is going to the sponsor. Also, we obtain all final invoices and technical reports from the subrecipient within the contractual timeline. And we keep a copy for the project file. We also request and receive other final reports, a property report, patent report. You might have a project outcomes report, an assignment release document, whatever the sponsor requires. We obtain all of those reports. We keep a copy as a part of our closeout award file as an official record. And we ensure all cost sharing requirements have been met by the subrecipient and cost share reports received. Please note that failure to receive those cost share reports or to document the cost share or to submit the cost share may result in your institution taking on additional cost share to fulfill that cost share requirement, because that is a commitment that has to be met when we have cost share in our particular projects. All righty, well, we've come to the end. Are there any questions? So I want to share some highlights. Here are some takeaways for this particular webinar on subawards. First and foremost, establish and maintain contact with the subrecipient's sponsored research office. So when you begin to work with a subrecipient, you're going to reach out to that particular sponsor program's office and work with the individual specialist at that particular institution. Also, work with the principal investigator to ensure regular contact, that he or she is in regular contact with the subrecipient and that they're knowledgeable of the project status at all times. You don't want to come up on the end of the project and you don't have any information. They haven't progressed as you thought they had progressed, and you can't submit your final report or your annual report or whatever the report may be because the timeline has been slipped and you weren't aware because you weren't keeping in contact with the particular PI at the other institution. I suggest you establish a tickler system to keep track of all subawards start and end dates. Now, this is of particular importance because if you have several subawards running at the same time, you don't want to run the risk of having one slip an end date and it needs to be closed, you didn't close it, or it needs to be open for another year and you missed the cutoff. You run the risk of going back and having to do a whole new subcontract or subaward where you could have done an amendment to extend it, provide more funds, or whatever the situation may be. Work with the principal investigator and grants accounting to ensure cost share is being recorded in keeping with the agency approved budget, and also that it's being timely submitted. Because remember, if they're not keeping up with their cost share, it may be a situation where you have to keep up with that particular cost share and provide that cost share. Now, work with the principal investigator and grants accounting to ensure invoices are being timely submitted. This is very important because if you don't have your invoices submitted timely, then if the sub doesn't submit his invoices timely to you, you cannot submit your invoice timely to that particular funder. And then it calls a backup with grants accounting. And we want to work with our grants accounting office and our sponsored programs offices to ensure that those things are done on a timely basis and we don't cause any angst with any one of those up, because they have several projects that they're working at one time. Work with the PI, grants accounting, and other offices for seamless project closeout. Okay, do we have any questions? Well, if we don't have any questions, I want to thank you for participating in this webinar on subawards, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.